All right, great Bitcoin flipping show. My name is Gavin Mehl. Today we're gonna do a space here. We're gonna talk about some of the elements that are coming up regarding the great Bitcoin flipping and the exciting points that I can share publicly, and this restoration of the ultimately how Bitcoin's chain of digital signatures itself is a form of restoring property rights, which is exactly what the American Republic is all about: restoring property rights, taking the power back from these elite bankers who took things over and restoring it back to digital by restoring the digital signatures. I mean, it's so similar. So I'm going to talk about some of those things today. See if I can get it out of my kind of do a little download on my monologue on that once I get started. So stay tuned for that, and then we'll open up. And I have a couple speakers I invited up. I want to just get something on the record here. So this is going to be Great Bitcoin Flipping Show series number 4 that I've done, and I'm just building momentum over the next year. This is a 1-year process, so you can look for this happening December 2026. All right, that's the target date, December 2026. It's going to be a slow burn. That's not a very slow burn, 1 year, but it's a slow burn gradually. So right now we're at the inflection point of the bottom, where the price of the Bitcoins is so offset, that it is at its biggest. I think it's inflection point. I don't know I'm not looking at the charts too much, but it's cheap as heck. That's all I'm saying. It's cheap. So unlike Michael Saylor and the laser-eyed Maxis and Max Kaiser, which I'm all about bringing in liquidity into the cult. I think it's great. More liquidity, the better. Buy more BTC as much as you want. Good. Get as much Tether. Good. I'm happy. More liquidity, the better. Because once we have the rails set up, which is in process, okay, that is an idea that can be done now. That's formulating. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to be a process. Then I'll be able to have the one-click atomic swaps. All the liquidity, not all, but a lot of the liquidity from the BTC side will then be able to swap over and switch. Once they know about it, the hash power will begin to change as it becomes more profitable, and this natural flipping will happen. So be mindful. It's going to be about a year-long process, and this is not about hodl like the BTC guys. It's about learning the protocol and getting kind of familiar with it, how you can capitalize on it, and really how we preserve our rights, our property rights. That's the beautiful part about it. We're going to preserve digital by having a chain of digital signatures. It actually preserves property rights, dude. Talk about that today. So let's do it. Great Bitcoin Flipping Show. This is going to be number 4. I'll see you on the inside, the top. Bass jam. We got some music today on the Great Bitcoin Flipping Show. I just had to restart. We're doing it again. You didn't see any of that on the recording side, but I got it on the live. Here we go. It's going to be all about the great Bitcoin flipping today. Can't wait. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm ready to give a little monologue talk. I want to kind of get this going off my chest. This ought to be kind of good. Woo! What's up, everybody? Today's going to be the Great Bitcoin Flipping Show number 4. We're going to have some excitement today. I want to share some information here for the first time that is a theory that I've kind of come up with on a paper that was written about 2022, dating back to the Federalist Papers. And I also want to about restoring the republic with the chain of digital signatures. It's a theory that hasn't been put out yet. It's not in writing. It's just a theory that I got in my head right now. So I want to talk about that briefly, and I want to open up as well. But I want to talk as well about some of these things that are happening. When I had to post a little short yesterday about all the exciting things happening with the BRC 100. I see Babbage listening, and all the exciting things happening with the wallet standard infrastructure, having a neutral wallet standard infrastructure, which is so important and so valuable for us to get onto this new MetaNet protocol as we're evolving. And I invited Bose up as well. It looks like he's here. He's going to come up too and talk about how some of the things he's working on because of this tokenization model as well. It's like, tokenization seems to be allowed now. And I mean, in the US, I mean, there's so much like for me, it's like, I couldn't see a more exciting time as a new person. I mean, I had a talk here. I have an attorney that we're working with, and he is basically working with a lot of consortium of banks, and he's trying to help these state banks, basically bring into the adopt stablecoin protocol, because they realize they're going to get left behind if they don't adopt stablecoin protocols. And the banks feel like they're, according to him, the banks feel like they're just like running just to stand still to keep up. Like they're just like, how do we do this? What's the regulation? This is so crazy. Like this Genius Act is passed and it's happening now, and they just don't even know what to do. I mean, they're just like looking for answers. They're desperate, and they feel like, from the way the read I'm getting right now from him, he's working with all these banks, is like they want to build some sort of a stable, and they don't know what to do. Or they're just like, what do we do? Build Ethereum? It doesn't work. BTC. What is that? They're literally, the law passed too fast. It passed like so fast to where these banks are almost like, they feel like they're going to get left behind. I'm not asking for pity on the banks. I mean, nobody gives a crap, but I'm saying that there's an opportunity here. So a huge opportunity to fill the void and the gap. Once these boomer people, these banker people, like smaller community style banks, they understand that like stable coins are actually a real tangible way to operate. And once they can start seeing, they can use a wallet infrastructure with like the BRC 100 standard, and we start to build like this alliance with them. This is how the flipping happens, because we have these real institutional style, enterprise adoption clients. They need this, or they're going to get left behind. That's where they're at right now. And they realize that. Had Genius not passed, we'd be talking, theorizing, let's hope. We're not there. Genius has passed. They have to adapt. The United States federal government has already declared that they're going to be rolling out into stable coins in the next 2.5 years. So now it's a matter of like, well, are they going to just do a federal stable coin? We don't know these. These are all like, we don't know how yet. The how is going to happen over the next couple of years. And that's where I think the real opportunity is going to come about, is these payment rails. In bringing forward, it's going to be called USD, US dollar. That's the big meme, USD. So, and how's it going to be? What's the most efficient way it's going to be done? So, these are huge, big ideas, but they're coming forward. I wanted to talk openly about this for the first time regarding this paper before I open up, and that is so in 2022 there was a paper by Dr. Wright. He wrote a paper about how establishing meaning in the First Amendment. And it talked about how, it was extensive references to the Federalist Papers and rolling out like the protections of religious liberty as a natural right in an opposing state imposed religious establishment or taxes. And it referenced Madison. Now, Madison, just for the people who haven't read the Federalist Papers or know a lot about the founding of the Republic, I mean, he was like this young prodigy guy. He was commissioned by Thomas Jefferson after the Declaration of Independence was penned, the parchment by Jefferson. He commissioned Madison to then eventually write the Bill of Rights. But before the Bill of Rights came out, Madison was writing these Federalist Papers along with Jay and And so Madison, he's like a 22-year-old prodigy kid, just a genius, big thinker, big idea guy. And he's all about, basically coming up with these very incredible ideas of freedom and liberty that were formulated for the first time, not that first time. I mean, they're very biblical in a way, but very, very much for the, crystallized for the first time. And so they inspired Dr. Wright a lot, and they inspired, as shown in this paper. And so it's important because building on the analogy that Madison talked about in the Federalist Papers, specifically, I think was Federalist Paper number 10, the Bitcoins. Now hear me out, because this is my first time kind of discussing this, and I don't think it's ever been discussed. It's like brand new idea. But Bitcoin's chain of digital signatures, which it's as defined in the white paper, 2008 white paper, it could act as like a countermeasure, like a technological countermeasure that could break the alleged control system that we've been operating under this, fiat monetary system. Okay, by having a chain of digital signatures. And if it's going to be USD through the chain of digital signatures called USD, fine. But as long as it's got the chain of digital signatures attached to it, then it could potentially restore property rights. And that's the theory, because the the white paper, I think what it actually does is it restores true property rights through the chain of digital signatures by stopping the securitization, or like the creating of security aspect over the property. I mean, without consent, you can do a contract, but a lot of times this property gets transferred to securities and people don't even know about it, and it just takes property rights away from people. And by restoring it back with the protocol on the white paper, it could shield against it basically could shield against a lot of these property rights that have been taken away from people over time, and dismantled through centralization and debt-based control systems, making it like permissionless final settlement money possible, and like having an actual common money again. So I think there's a real big idea here that's going to come about between the connection between the people who care about liberty and they care about the Constitution, which are a lot of people. I mean, most Americans, at least who are informed, we care most about the Constitution. We care about liberty, free and first and foremost. And then also the people who care about Bitcoin. So it's like, I think the combination between those two worlds is starting to come about. And for the first time, it seems like I'm finding myself in the middle of that opportunity right now a lot. So I wanted to just bring this out there and kind of get it out there for the first time and start to formulate it. I'm going to try to write a paper on it, and maybe on a Substack or something. And I also want to share some of the cool things about the Substack. I didn't think anybody was watching any of my Substack. I didn't, I just started it. I was like, oh, nobody watched this anyways. I just put it out there. But, like I'm not going to say who, but one of the big influencers who I follow, he's recommending my Substack to his people. I couldn't believe that. Like, he's obviously reading it. I'm like, I didn't even think it was serious. So I'm going to try to stay focused on the Bitcoin stuff, like the Great Bitcoin Flipping Talk, and not just hype and hyperbole and stuff, and memes, but also just like big ideas like this, restoring the republic, because he's an influencer for like constitutional stuff and freedom stuff, and American liberty. So he's an influencer on that, and not necessarily about Bitcoin or anything. So he's obviously interested in the law side of it. And so if I can also tie that into it, it's just going to be very entertaining to that audience, because they want to learn about how to, restore property rights like that have been taken away from us. I mean, so let me just give you kind of an example about this property rights thing that's so big. And people, I've never talked about it here, but I'm just going to talk openly. See, in the early days when they did the Declaration of Independence, and after the Constitution was passed, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 was the land disposal clause. And so it basically said that the Congress had the right to dispose of all, had not the right, the duty to dispose of all the lands. And they did that through something called letters patent. Now, the first patent was 1604, prior to the Declaration of Independence, and that was from the king. So the king of England, he claimed property rights over the the colonies there initially. Now, once the Declaration of Independence passed, the property rights, they said, we're out of here, King George, no more to you. We're doing it ourselves. So then they passed this new clause inside the Constitution that said, now Congress is going to enable the disposing of the land through these patents. And so the patents got out, and they started being issued all over the country, and it was about going west, saying, if you guys buy land out in the west or get land, apply for a patent. And the patent was forever rights. So the original patent in 1604 was just by the king, and it was just a temporary patent. You didn't get it forever, but you got it. You had the right to use the land. Now, the difference with the American patents were they had them forever. They were true title. They were a loyal sovereign title to the land. That's how they were issued, and you could read it yourself. And it's freaking amazing when you read it. You're like, wow, these letters patents were sovereign, a loyal title to the land, signed by the President of the United States. And there was thousands and thousands of them issued, for 150 years or so. And then after that, in the early days of the 1900s, after the Federal Reserve passed, and then the fiat, and then the other acts passed after that, 1913 and then 1933, and then after the 14th Amendment, what happened was that They didn't get rid of that. They couldn't. The patents you can't get rid of them. They're forever rights. But what they did is they put an overlay over it and they issued deeds, warranty deeds, grant deeds, and these deeds, and what's called color of title. And people don't even know it. You probably don't heard this for the first time and think I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. When we buy the property, we don't actually get title. We have only color of title. We have no property right. Crazy, but I'm sorry. It's just the law. It's called color of title. And so while we think we own the property, we're just tenants on the property. And it says that in all the documents. You read through them. I read through them. I was so mad, and I said, I cannot believe they made me a tenant in my own property. I thought I was buying this place. I was so pissed when I finally realized that, and I got scammed, bamboozled by that. But what can you do about it? That's just the way it works now. So, you become a tenant on your own land, and you're basically a renter in your land. And so that's called color of title. Now, so the point of this all is we need to restore the chain of the property rights through the chain of digital signatures. That's how we do it. And that's why not only restoring the republic and these rights to, let's say, the land that was originally there, but also restoring property rights through the chain of digital signatures. I think that's going to be a big connection that's going to happen. So, Casey, Nicole, I just, wanted to get that off my chest. So, good morning. Looks like.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
That was a wonderful opening. It feels like that's the beginning of a much bigger conversation. So thank you for sharing.
It is a big conversation. It's a big idea. It's the first time I even thought about it before, but I'm kind of connecting all this law stuff that I've done, and I'm starting to realize. But what happened is that I actually, for the first time, am beginning to learn what a chain of digital signatures even is. Honestly, it's my ignorance. Okay, I know it's in the white paper. It's defined. I mean, I'm with you, but it's like, it's baby steps coming in from the boomer world into this over time, slowly, like thinking like, whoa, what is this chain of digital signatures thing? I mean, I've heard it a million times, but it's like, I will say, I'll be honest, I'm beginning to learn. I'm beginning to understand. I don't understand it yet. I don't understand a chain of digital signatures yet. I don't. But I'm beginning to learn what it means. And I think once I really get it, it will crystallize and I'll be like, oh my God. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that once I understand what that actually means and what it actually represents, then it will crystallize and be like, whoa, my hope is that it will restore property, like that I'm correct, that it's restoring property rights. That's what my hope is. And I think that's what I believe it will do. But it's going to take more of a technical understanding. To do that. What is the Merkle? I'm learning about Merkle trees. I'm learning about the Merkle trees and the Merkle roots and all the hashing. I mean, I think that's the key. I mean, I have to learn how this thing is put together. Once I see that, it will make sense. That's my hope. That's my hope. Because right now it's I understand it in theory only. Which that's a big step. I mean, I think that's going to be key. So looks like you got Babbage up. I'm one of the fanboys of Babbage, Ty from Babbage as well. So I'm Casey, you got your hand up. Are you waving or is your hand up?
I was just saying hi to Ty. Welcome up, Ty.
Welcome, buddy. Yeah, feel free to chime in whenever you like. You don't have to talk. You can. You're welcome to. You're open forum. Oh, Ty, go ahead.
Hey guys. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Just making sure my mic's working. I'm actually joining on my computer this morning, so I'm not on my phone. But yeah, interesting. Conversations and perspectives. Glad to be here. Happy to answer any questions about BSV blockchain stuff and whatnot. I think what you're saying is interesting in terms of digital signatures and the ways that they can be used from a there's legal aspects, there's technical aspects to it. But really, I think the tokens that Bitcoin allows people to hold, and then we write these constraints like script, right? And of course, subject to law and everything else. But we write these constraints in script, and we say whoever meets these constraints can carry this token forward and can allow it to then be disposed of in any particular way. So that's kind of the same way as someone might have to sign something in order to let it go to the next person, right? Like there's a chain of physical signatures, at least in, of course you send the paper to the DMV and you get it back. So maybe there's not actually just one anymore, but conventionally on title, there would be a chain of signatures that says, right, first this person owned this thing, and then the second person took ownership and they sign it away. Now the third person has ownership. And tokens on the blockchain kind of work that same way, I guess, right? So you got signatures that transfer from one owner to the next. And anybody can put a thing called a covenant. So a covenant is kind of like how you have on property, right? If you own property, you could put a thing you could record on the deed and say, I don't want anybody ever to chop down this tree that's in my front yard. It's been here for 100 years. So whoever sells this, I'll sell you the house, but whoever buys it, everybody has to agree this tree is never going to get chopped down. And so it kind of constrains every future owner through the deeds and everything that way. And you can do that, right? Homeowners associations do that when people agree to form one of those, or different things like that exist in the real world. And when we put this on blockchain, you can do similar things with constraints placed on scripts that go and model these outputs, these tokens, these UTXOs, these assets, these digital assets that people own and have signatures. And so by constraining what future owners or something like that can do within the script, you can kind of pretty accurately model these real world legal constructs using blockchain. Now, that's not to say, and this gets a little bit maybe philosophical, but this is not to say that the blockchain is a replacement for law or legal enforcement, but it is a way to make record of the intentions of the parties and the constraints which they intended to put on particular assets. So I think that's an interesting thing to kind of map over, and maybe there's some stuff, as we think about the technology and what it does, and then we try to map it back onto the concepts which you're talking about here. We might be able to answer. And of course, I'm more on the technology side, but I can certainly explain how my understanding. Of course, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand as much about the Constitution as some people, regrettably. I really should understand more about this history and these very interesting aspects. But maybe there's some ways where I can help connect some dots or map over some of the concepts that people are talking about onto the technology capabilities that script and ownership via UTXO oriented digital assets kind of enables, right, in passing forward that sort of baton of, right, now this is the owner and this is what the actions that can be done according to this token, and all of that stuff.
And that's huge. That's huge, Di. I appreciate you sharing that. And your expertise on this and insight is actually like going to be the kind of the well needed, like the big answer, because let's say, for example, let's just say these use a bank, for example, and the banks want to get, they realize there's a panic. They're in a little bit of a panic mode. I'm talking generalities right now, but the Genius Act was passed. Some of these smaller banks, community style banks, they're a little bit worried that they're just going to get swallowed up and pushed away because of the fact that, hey, look, all these big banks, the Fed banks, they're all getting involved in the stablecoins, and these smaller people, they don't even know what it is. They don't even have a clue about any of this. And so they're a little bit panicking right now. The law's passed, and they're trying to figure out what to do. I'm getting this vibe right now, and I'm hearing from their attorneys. So one of their attorneys, and I think the big takeaway is that it can restore the chain of digital signatures and the property rights. I guess without even saying chain of digital signatures to them, it can bring the property rights. I think they can understand property rights. And then the how is hard for them to get, but they understand property rights and how important that is. So is that true, Ty, that the chain of digital signatures like kind of it does restore the property rights? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, a blockchain is just a digital record keeping system that's really hard to mess with in certain ways. And so when I don't think it creates new property rights, but I do think that, well, like the Genius Act, for example, what that does is it really it does two things. Firstly, it clarifies regulations around payment-oriented U.S. dollar stablecoins, right? So my understanding is, right, stablecoins used for payment are not a commodity. They are not a security. Therefore, they're not CFTC or SEC. They're subject to the banking regulations, and so only banks are allowed to issue U.S. dollar stablecoins, and they need to, undergo AML and KYC and all of that stuff. And then it sort of just, it enables clarity around that. I remember in 2019, I was working on a project, and we had to go onto a thing called the NMLS, or the National Multi-State Licensing System. And there was like 50 different states, and they each had their own money transmitter license, or MTL. And that was really confusing. So depending on the goals of the project that someone is trying to do within maybe a bank, and this is like, this mainly applies to banks who have been chartered and actually, they're now kind of able to issue stable coins with clarity more than they could in the past. Not that anybody else is really able to, but yeah, those entities, they now have some more clarity about that, and kind of some opportunities to run pilot programs or innovate or maybe work with vendors. So there are opportunities there in terms of, well, we can work with banks and we can show them some of the technology capabilities that we have in terms of blockchain, and allowing us to model, transfers, possession, things like that, using a BSV, digital asset with a UTXO or something like that, right? And then again, subject to their compliance and other things like that. So there are opportunities there within the Genius Act that have just been created, that previously I think no bank would ever talk to any blockchain ecosystem provider about this, because they were really just a little bit scared, right? They just didn't know. They didn't want to jeopardize their charter as a bank, right? They don't want to get disconnected from the Federal Reserve System because they weren't compliant with the way they went about maybe thinking about stablecoin pilots or something like that, where now I think that opportunity is there. I guess going back to the genesis of your question in terms of whether new legal rights or things like that may have been created here, I think that really, when you have your money in a bank that might be complying with that might be maybe issuing something pursuant to the Genius Act or something, it's really up to that bank in terms of their policies, right? You agree to the terms of service when you created a bank account, and so they can still impose whatever they want. But I suppose depending on the architecture of the solution which they were to adopt, whether it was just purely arbitrary, there's no records of your possession of particular coins in your account at a particular time, right? Maybe it uses the Lightning Network where there's no on-chain records at all really about that, versus using BSV. Well, we can get some benefits there in terms of record keeping, about maybe holding these people accountable. And then if in the further future we started to push them towards a network where they're actually like allowing settlement between banks, as well as their customer facing interactions with US dollar settlement networks via BSV and stablecoins, then we could start to see some interbank coordination atop a set of open standards And that type of thing would allow us to be more aware of how our US dollars are being moved and whatnot, perhaps in the future. And the Genius Act is not incompatible, in my understanding at least, with that type of system or solution. So I guess in the widest lens, like, does it create more freedom or less freedom for everyday people? We can certainly push for a world where it creates more freedom, and I think that BSV would be the way to get there.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, well taken. I mean, it's something that is right. It is ripe and it's genuine. It's not a theory. It's really happening. I'd be really interested to hear maybe your theory, Ty, or how you. So we know the laws passed, and now they're going to roll out USD, which I guess would be called USD stablecoin. We don't know. We don't know what it's going to be at. Is it going to be Tether? Is it going to be Circle? Is it going to be BSV? Is it going to be what is it? We don't know that yet. We don't have an answer for that. It's going to happen over the next couple of years. It could be lots of them. So, in your mind, could it? I mean, I guess this is a dumb question, but could it work on the BSV blockchain? I mean,
well, so my understanding is, yes, it could work on the BSV blockchain because it could work on any blockchain, right? I don't believe the Genius Act, and I haven't read it fully, right? But I have a high level. I just kind of looked it up right as I heard you talking about it here, and I don't think they have written in there, you must use Ethereum or you must use Polygon or BSV or whatever. So of course we are still in the early stages of this, and there's requirements in the Genius Act for particular entities to develop rules and to kind of to push those policies forward. And there are a couple ways that can go, I think, in terms of how that happens. So that policy making next steps sort of thing, now that the Genius Act has been passed, is still obviously ongoing, and I think that should continue to be an ongoing conversation. But really, what I think the choice we have here is are they going to allow for, like you said, lots of different things, right? Where we have one bank that might want to try one pilot one way on one network, and we want to give them some obviously bright lines they can't cross there, but allow them to experiment, so that way we can see different approaches and test out these different pilots, right? Or are they just going to kind of centrally decide that, according to the policies that get made after this Genius Act has been passed, that okay, all banks need to plug into this Federal Reserve run pilot that everybody's using, and we're all kind of going to onboard ourselves into that one program. I personally would love to see that competition among different blockchain ecosystems in terms of settlement efficiency and record keeping and transparency, and the potential for even future standards of interbank settlement and interoperability in the payment stablecoin space, right? So that when someone holds their money in one place and they want to settle it with a merchant somewhere else, well, the way we actually settle that could change, and it could be more efficient because of the underlying network that gets used for that settlement. So there's ways that we could start to enable that, and there's ways that the policy conversations could go where it could help us or hurt us in our ability to get there. I think the best thing that we can do inside of BSV and with our time that we have now and this opportunity would be just to build in the open and show the possibilities when it comes to these types of architectures, so that we might be able to partner with particular smaller banks or something like that in order to create a successful pilot. Because I do believe we have the best technology capabilities. It's just a matter of also building up institutional credibility and those types of relationships with those entities, so that we can get that stuff deployed in the best way, and so that then maybe that pilot turns into a 2 or 3 bank pilot, right? Where where now, and maybe if you guys have studied the history of networks like Visa in the, I don't know, 60s or 70s or something like that, right? But like it starts to expand, and you get multiple people on board with a particular network or way of doing things. And supposing that network is, allowing different banks to bring in their accounts and the assets that they control onto that network, and then exchange and deal with other banks that way. It would certainly be better to have that type of thing, in my opinion, registered on a public ledger that actually the records are there, so that we don't lose track of things, so that people can go through and check things out, of course, while preserving privacy for the individual account holders and everything like that, and while also complying with regulation. But I think that's a much better system than, somebody just coming in from on high and saying, let's put this into this, private ledger, right? Like a hyper ledger or a private blockchain that nobody can really access. Because I think the spirit of our financial system is around being able to audit and being able to know that certain things have integrity and that they haven't been tampered with and the records haven't been changed. And when the blockchain headers at the highest level, right, are openly available, then we know that all the data in those blocks hasn't been changed. And with a private blockchain, that's simply not necessarily the case. And so enabling the use of a scalable public network at the base layer for this, I think, would certainly make it so that it's easier to settle those types of transactions. And but we're not there yet. We need to really think about how do we build the best pilot, or even a demo or proof of concept that says, this is how a bank can allow its customer accounts to be denominated in this stablecoin asset on BSV, and then when those customers want to plug into their stablecoin portal through this bank, right? Maybe the customers hold the private key somehow in a BRC 100 type world, but obviously the network that allows for those transactions to occur is still subject to regulation. So it's not kind of like the Satoshi where it's just everywhere and you can just move it. It's not permissionless, but within their regulatory framework, I think that's going to be the opportunity we have to work inside of those systems using frameworks like the Genius Act, which does, I think, create necessary clarity for banking entities and things like that, in order to allow the most accountability that we can have in maybe they still have to comply with a freezing order where your account gets frozen, or maybe they still have to enforce anti-money laundering regulations and things like that. But combating the financing of terrorism and these other regulations, which banking entities do need to comply with, but at least within that system, we would have insight into, we can see the assets. They have been frozen. We can see the order that has been put out. Sometimes sometimes you can't even have that, I guess, because you're dealing with like very complicated schemes where if you see that one account has been frozen, then the other entities could take the other bad actors in that scheme could take actions to try to move their assets away, and that type of thing would require either much better coordination among enforcement entities, or require some type of, once again, even off-chain settlement system where it's not as accountable to the public, and we don't have the ability to audit the accounts and things like that. So these are the types of questions, just to try to give the people here. And this is probably something that not a lot of people here like to really think about too much, but it's like, this is the type of lens through which the actual executives in these banks are going to be viewing this when they think about, okay, what does this actually mean? And then all the stuff that they have to deal with. So if we can at least put ourselves in their shoes in thinking about how to approach them in order to leverage these types of opportunities, then I think we have a better shot at trying to get more of the things that we care about implemented into the network, such as the possibility for potential, self-custody, or at least holding self-possession, right, where you hold the private key, things like that. And then going from there in terms of, well, we have to get from A to B eventually, and maybe this helps us get there. It really depends on how those conversations go in terms of the policy making that happens after the Genius Act has been enacted, and then how the banking entities behave and whether how coordinated they are, right? I would like to see a multi-pilot world though versus just a single Federal Reserve run pilot.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I mean, one of the things that back to the banking charter here that's happening is the OCC, which is the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency of the federal side, they're pushing out. They're really working with the big banks, and they're according to a couple of the newer reports that I've read, they're working with these bigger banks to roll into this federal, more of a federal system. And one of the companies that is lobbying them the most is Ripple, which apparently looks like, yeah, here we go. We got 5 companies. We got Circle, Ripple are the 2 main ones that are lobbying on this the most to push forward on how to do this. And then there's a couple of others, BitGo, Fidelity, Paxo, but Ripple is the number 2, Circle is the number 1. And so they're pushing forward to do more of a private, most likely, because as far as I know, the Ripple is doing a private blockchain, I believe that's what it is. So I'm not really sure, but maybe that, but that's kind of what their model is. They want to make it more of a proof of stake private model. And that's the angle. So we have to come in, and we have an opportunity to come in and over the next few years to really show why it's better to do it or proof of concept in a public model. And no, it could still be private, in the public blockchain. So that's I don't know. Is it private, Ty? Or I mean, how does it work? Like, let's say with a proof of stake network, is that yeah.
Well, so when we think about proof of stake, we're thinking about a way to secure a ledger, right? The way to actually decide who's going to be responsible to witness new transactions and record them into the ledger and kind of carry forward the network. And then, of course, that's one security model. We know proof of work on BSV is another model for securing the network. But the assets that exist on the network, I think, is the more important question here, which is public versus private records, right? How do the records, how accessible are the records associated with the existence of US dollars and how they flow through the system, right? So when we look at actually the original Bitcoin white paper, I think it was, it shows like the privacy model, right? Where in the old world we have sort of just transactions and everything, and then the public is kind of is cordoned off. I'm thinking of a particular diagram that I think is in the white paper somewhere, and then in the new model, it's saying that the public and the transactions exist alongside each other. It's just the identities of the transacting parties that are separate, right? So that's one of the strongest arguments, I think, for trying to advocate that the records and the actual transactions that happen in the system can be public, maybe similar in nature in some way to like a stock market ticker tape, where we can see the trades. We just don't know, exactly who the trading parties were, right? So the market orders go up, and then they're kind of public in that way. I think certainly for banking, it's a little more challenging just because of that situation I described, where an enforcement action might need to happen and it can't be public. The enforcement action can't be public until obviously after the fact, and maybe there's a lot of different entities. So making sure those entities can coordinate that type of enforcement action across multiple entities involved in some type of complex scheme would be necessary. But I think that the most important thing here is like, when these people, the government, these banks, right, when they make a decision about the way that this network should operate and the degree of accountability that should exist, I think one of the key benefits to blockchain is is not just the settlement efficiency, but is actually the capacity to be more transparent when it comes to the records. Everybody pushes the idea, I think, not everybody, but a lot of people think about, Bitcoin as this pseudonymous or even anonymous system where we don't get to have public records. But actually, the blockchain is out there and it is available for people to look through and audit and see the transactions that exist. And on top of the blockchain, a network can be built called an overlay network, right? Or a layer 2 or different things that it can be called. But the point is, I think we should push for the use of a public ledger for these types of projects where people can check out the records. They can actually see, right, these are the holdings of this bank. We can see these things moving around. Now, we're not going to reveal which account numbers and who owns those account numbers, right? And we're not going to reveal the identity, right? So thinking a bit, again, back to that graphic that's in the white paper talking about privacy, but we don't want to let everybody know like who has how much money. Obviously, that would be a problem, and where all that money goes and all the spending patterns that everybody has. But we do want to have a degree of accountability for solvency of some of the concerns that people have is how many what reserves are being maintained in particular financial systems, right? And people trust auditors and everything, but then look at the people who originally audited like the Wirecard thing. It's like the trust in the auditing system isn't necessarily there as much as maybe it used to be conventionally with our big four auditing firms. I certainly think that a public ledger is the place where we should record these assets, and I think BSV is the best ledger to do that.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I invited Binary up as well, or Casey did. So welcome to join up. And before we bring you up, let's go over to you, Bose. I know you joined the stage, and I've been wanting to hear what you have to say. So, what's on your mind, buddy? If you can talk. Okay, we'll come back to you, Bose. Oh yeah, Bose, go ahead.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
How you doing, buddy?
Okay. So hey, man. So thanks for having me. Just two kind of main things. The Interactive Brokers, which is $100 billion company that lets people trade on the stock market, have been given the green light to allow brokerage accounts to have stablecoins. So their customers, if they're gambling on stocks and shares, can have stablecoins in their USD balance, which is pretty interesting. And then the other thing is the DTCC, which is the company that kind of is responsible for making certificates, share certificates, and kind of keeping track of the shares in companies and stuff. I think probably mostly public companies has been given the go-ahead to tokenize their shares. And so if you kind of put those two things together, it means that Interactive Brokers can trade tokenized shares, and they can allow their customers to have tokenized shares and tokenized dollars in their accounts. Now, it might not make much difference on the surface, but underneath the hood, it's all going in blockchain. But I mean, it's quite a big gap between tokenizing on Ethereum and tokenizing on BSV. I think we're quite a long way away.
What is the gap there, Bose?
Maybe it's SPV and overlay networks and indexes and UTXOs, which is just it's a bit more work, frankly. I think maybe even a lot more work. And the question is probably something like, do we need 1 million transactions per second or not? Because like if you're Interactive Brokers, you're doing 1 million transactions per second probably on centralized servers anyway. So the question then becomes like, can we do this on a UTXO chain? And if the answer is yeah, no, not yet, then the answer is not yet. And it will take time to get to the point where it's even necessary, where those kind of guys are saying not only do we need the capacity, but also the technology is ready. SVB is like really robust. It really works. These overlay networks are really like that will work. And I just don't think that we're there yet, and actually not by a long shot. And I just want to say this other thing because this has been on my mind as well, is that all of the interfaces that I've built for the Bitcoin software stuff, every single one of those Bitcoin apps
Bozo,
relies on
can
having.
you try to speak a little closer to your mic? Is there any way?
Sure. Is that any better?
It's a little bit better.
But,
It's not as clear as
okay.
Ty, but if you could try to, do the best you can. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Hold on a sec. Hold on.
I want you to finish your thought. So I saw you went on mute. Do you want to?
Sorry.
There we go.
Is that better?
Much better. Much better.
Okay, so you got this stuff about the interactive brokers and the DTCC,
Yeah,
but it was
I got
a little bit.
That's huge, but I'll come back to that. Go ahead and finish what you were.
No,
saying.
the other thing is kind of like I wanted to talk about like the Bitcoin software that I've been creating the last 3 to 4 months. One of the things that the major missing piece is that the back end of every single one of those apps is an exchange. And with OneSat Market actually not being functional, I think Luke is about to release the updated version, OneSat Market version 2.0 or something. I'm not sure, but anyway, like up until that happens, there is a major piece of BSV infrastructure that's simply missing that you will find on other chains, where exchange technology is not only like proliferating, it's well developed, it's got lots of development capital, it's got lots of people developing, it's got lots of solutions, it's got lots of players who have started companies who are running exchanges, etc., etc. None of that's happening here. Like we've got OneSat Market and maybe something like Zoid, but unless somebody tells me about some market that's some exchange that's actually functional, be it BSV, like the options are extremely limited. I don't know about them. And so kind of what we need to get to is that point where you can pretty much say, okay, here's my app, and I want to connect an exchange as a backend. Here's an open source exchange reference implementation. Here's the MCP server. Here are the Claude skills, whatever is needed. Please, can you do this? Bang, bang, bang. And then you put the exchange in as the back end of your app. But like, until we get there, it's kind of an uphill struggle. Like I don't, and this, this is from somebody who's been here, like building here for 6 years on and off. And we don't have a single really functional exchange as far as I can tell. I'm happy to be corrected on that, by the way.
All right. When you say exchange, okay, go ahead, Ty.
I was just probably going to ask maybe a similar question to you, which is, when we think about exchange, we're not just thinking about like a fiat to BSV on-ramp per se. Maybe we're thinking more about like a tokenized asset exchange where we can say, I have this token that represents my house or my vehicle or my whatever stock certificate, and I want to offer that. I want to put it on offer so that someone can trade me, for some other assets which they have, whether it's a stable coin or maybe just a base layer Satoshis, maybe it's some other token itself. And then we kind of settle that transaction on chain. We have standards for that. We have ways that can be plugged into every app and experience. Is that kind of is that what you're thinking when you say exchange in this context?
Actually, what I'm specifically talking, I mean, yes, on the one hand, a place for trading securities, which would deal with KYC as well. I mean, it's nice to have permissionless, but at the end of the day, like if this is going to scale up, like it has to scale up within a legal framework. So I think KYC is kind of important for an exchange, very important. And then, but actually the use case that I had in mind, apart from trading shares, which is the primary use case, is saving updates to sequential inscriptions. So in the document editor, the first time I press save, the first time I commit my document to chain is number one in a sequence of ordinals. And then every time I, add something to the document or add something to the code base, whatever it is that I'm doing, like I'm updating, committing to sequential inscriptions. And I kind of want that to be, I want the exchange to be the other side of that, the back end of that.
So that sequence of updates, that sort of, well, to go back to where Gavin started us off with, right? That sort of that chain of digital signatures that comprise spending and recreating the token and defining that sequence of updates, right, is there. And then maybe, so that's like when you hold the asset yourself, you can write things in there, and then when you go put it on the exchange, it gets traded, but that history sort of remains and travels with the asset itself.
Yeah, you can treat the whole sequence, like every ordinal in the sequence, as one asset, and then you could unwind to previous commits to see what the progression of work was. But like this, basically, the methodology basically says your proof of work could be any medium, right? It could be written, it could be images, drawing, or animation, or video, or documentary. But whatever save point where you commit to chain, that's evidence of your proof of work from the genesis, when your work was zero, when it was just nothing, up to whatever it is now, up to the finished product. So maybe you save 100 or 1,000 times before you've finished the product.
Work, you mean like records and history more than like proof of work in the mining?
Exactly. Your proof of work can be in any medium. It could be writing, it could be poetry, it could be art, whatever. The point is everyone works differently. But if you're saving to chain and it's costing you like, 1/10 of a penny or whatever every time you commit, you have a complete work history of all of the stuff that you've done. And work history.
Yeah. And I'm very glad that we're now thinking in the same model when it comes to, like, this is essentially what you're describing is just the UTXO model, and then combining it with something like BRC-79, which is an exchange protocol or a mechanism of exchange. And it's very aligned with that, and the way that BRC-100 works, and the way the overlays work, the way that, of course, identity can be overlaid or kept off chain, but within those types of exchange systems, people are finally starting to think in these terms and model things this way, which is, I think, the necessary progression in terms of getting us towards what you're describing, which is, let's fill this gap that other chains have these capabilities. We should make sure that when we define ours, it's out there for people to use. Completely agree with you on putting those primitives in place, and then hopefully we can be interoperable within different UTXO based token systems across even this one chain, and that way people can trade their MNEE for their ordinals, for their Satoshis, for whatever, and we can make records of all of these transactions, and also the assets and the histories and work associated with with each of those assets. It would be very, very nice to standardize that type of foundation layer. In fact, that's one of the things that I've been talking about with some of the people that I work with in terms of just trying to push those things forward. So excited that lots of people are thinking about this.
Badass. Yeah, that's huge, man. This is a big idea. Standardizing with this other BRC-79. Let's go to Crypto Spartacus and keep it going, the conversation going here. We'll it looks like you joined us as well, buddy. Did you want to chime in at all?
Yeah, just because you guys are talking about the Genius Act, I wanted to just bring to everyone's attention this post that I saw 6 days ago. I put it in the chat, talking about how BSV wouldn't meet the requirements for the Clarity Act because one address has more than 10% of the supply. I just wanted to get your and Ty's thoughts on that.
Yeah, first of all, 10%, the person never read the Clarity Act potentials, obviously, so that's improper. So it's first of all, it's a proposed law, and it says 20%, not 10. All right, so
okay. So I hadn't read it either, so I just wanted to get someone else's opinion.
So somebody just posts that and they just say, oh, 10%. Well, that's not, it doesn't even say 10%. It says 20%. And then even if it said 20%, it's not about ownership or control. It's about like actual, just because there's a whale in the act, being a whale doesn't necessarily mean that you control the whole network. You know, it has to be, from the way I understand the way they're proposing the law, and it's not passed yet, but the way they're proposing the law, it would be about somebody coming in like Jed McCaleb or these people front running the entire network and collecting all the coins up front. You know, and then they launch the network. You know, 20% goes to them. They put those into the foundation over there, and then boom, that now is completely not going to be able to pass. It's not going to qualify. Somebody comes in later and buys a bunch of tokens as a whale. I don't think that. First of all, yeah, I don't think it would apply, in my opinion.
One other thing I'd like to point out there is within ownership structures where there's a custodian that holds assets on the behalf of others, right? So like maybe an exchange has 10,000 customers, but then that exchange has a cold storage where assets are held. There needs to be a differentiation between, right, like custody and ownership in that sense. So, you know, we would need to figure out whether it's a specific entity that has ownership of those assets or whether they are obligated in the sense that they might just be a custodian. But I'm not familiar with the details on the Clarity Act specifically. I did just pull up the Genius Act so that I could speak on it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want a whole bunch of people to control. Well, see, we wouldn't want a single entity to control the entire network. That would not be the intended configuration.
Right. Yeah. And then that's exactly what the Clarity Act will potentially will prevent. It's not going to necessarily prevent. It doesn't mean that it's illegal. They just will not be qualified as a mature blockchain. Is the difference. So those people will be regulated who are holding 20% or more, like the McCaleb people of the world. They're doing that. They're going to have to be under the SEC. So they're still going to be able to operate as a security. That's going to be a different set of laws. Yeah. So, but I think the property rights thing with the chain of digital signatures is a big deal. Once the section 2 of the white paper, and apparently that's kind of what you're talking about too, Bose, where you want to make sure that we have a chain of these digital signatures and these records and making everybody have the proof of work to show this thing. And that's where where the UTXO model comes into play. So these banks, these people that are like looking, they want to get a stable coin. They want to adopt to blockchain. None of that, the whole digital signature, that's like totally music over their head. They understand property rights though. And if we can show them like, look, you can preserve your right to the property because you have a proof of your signature. You have a proof here that that's your record and you can prove that. Is that true on all blockchains, Ty, or is that just some blockchains?
I would say most blockchains, you do have, the network recognizing someone's right to, whether it's on Ethereum where you have an account-based system and, someone can sign transactions out of that withdraw from their account, or of course on UTXO-based blockchains. Yeah, I think most blockchains do have that capability in terms of just making sure that we have those, we have the network having consensus about who owns what and which assets are where, right? There are some like private blockchains, as we call them, or corporate blockchains where someone could conceivably more easily alter those types of records, or maybe just the consensus rules allow that type of thing from an administrative perspective. But I think that, yeah, most public blockchains we talk about in these discussions do have that type of capability. The things that people probably disagree about more are related to the way we go about scaling the network or allowing transactions at a particular volume, right? So block size or maybe account based versus UTXO based systems. But yeah, I think generally speaking, it's fair to say, that most of them do allow digital signatures that recognize that are recognized and then transfer value.
Nice. Okay, cool. Nice. Let's see. If anybody else wants to request up, now would be a good time. If I've got Crypto Spartacus, if you're going to chime back in, or Bose or Casey Nicole, if you have anything to add here, and anybody else could feel free to request up. We could take comments or questions, or anybody, just chime in.
I mean, you kind of cleared the air for me, so I don't really have anything else to say. I'll step down.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you, my man. It was, yeah, there was some news on that. I saw that as well. I was like, no, that's just totally misinformed. Cool.
I'd like to chime in back
Oh,
on this. So kind of what I've been focused on, what I've been thinking about the last, whatever it's been, kind of 8 weeks, is a global IP register. And so if you imagine that you click save on whatever it is that you're doing, could be a Word document, could be a podcast, could be some editing for something. But when you click save, you're committing the state of your work to chain, and that could happen by default naturally for everybody. So like everyone, every time they press save on whatever work they're doing, they're just saving a hash to chain, and it might cost them a little bit. But if you can get the wallet kind of into the OS, if you can get it integrated with apps, like you can imagine easily that you'd have a save button on Microsoft Word, where that referenced your wallet, right? Where you'd signed in with your wallet already to Microsoft Word, and then when you press save, it's just going to charge you like 1/100 of a penny or whatever it is. And we're not used to thinking about that kind of thing. We might save to the cloud, we might save locally, but it's like there is no central core that everybody's like. I think of this like the global totem pole, right? There's a totem pole that everyone has access to, and everyone can save their work continuously, and they can even save work that they're working on collaboratively with other people to show that this is the state of their work at this point. And like, yes, every blockchain is fundamentally a chain of digital signatures. Like that's the core value proposition. And that's actually why SegWit like destroys that so much. But besides, think about the global IP registry. When you tweet, your tweet isn't being saved to chain, but it could be, and it could contain some very valuable intellectual property that belongs to you, and that you want to register. Okay, when I said this at this time and it was saved to chain, that was me, that was my IP. Now IP is, it's a bit more complicated than that, right? It's a bit more like you invest a bit more in order to create not just strong IP, but also strong implementations that are commercial and that you can sell. So it's not like just a tweet is your IP, but actually it kind of is, because everything that you say belongs to you. You might not want to always, how would you say, be accountable for what you say, but in some cases, the identity that you use on social media is your genuine one, and you want to be held accountable for what you say, and you want to prove that you're adding value. But you can imagine a situation where, at a flick of a switch, you turn everybody's Twitter handle into an asset, a digital asset that belongs to them, that they can sign for on chain, and they can also sign for every individual tweet that they make after. And then you scale it up, not just from Twitter, but you add that functionality to Reddit on the back end, to all of the social media, to TikTok, You come at it from the inside, and then blockchain is kind of like natively inside. It's like recording your claim to all of your data, all of your tweets, all of your posts, blah 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 blah. So like, again, it's kind of a long way off, but you can imagine the global IP registry that basically just says, yeah, this belongs to this person, that belongs to that person. And then you start doing, as Wright talks about, like hash-based routing of payments. And we saw this last week that YouTube have just announced that they're going to do stablecoin payouts in PayPal USD, which is a really big deal, right? Because it means You can be a YouTube creator, make content that's got nothing to do with Bitcoin at all, or blockchain, or blah blah blah. Get 1 million views, and YouTube is going to make a payout to you, and you can say, "I'd like a payout in stablecoins, please." And you can take that stablecoin payout. In theory, you could ping it out to token holders if they were shareholders in your enterprise. So that piece of the puzzle has also, like in the last week, transpired payouts in stablecoins. And then if you kind of apply the global IP registry, you can scale it up and see how you would then route stablecoin dividends to all of the stakeholders in the economy as they like bought into various aspects, like whatever. You could be a shareholder in Mr. Beast, for example.
Yeah, there's a new. I just sent it to Casey. She's going to post it in the Nest area. And ultimately, what it says is this is from the Coinbase company. They've got a new app called Base App, and it says on here there's a creator on X. Her name is Naomi. She's like a track star, an Olympian track star. And so what she's doing is she's selling shares in her Naomi base token on Coinbase now, and it's a new thing. They're doing it. They just launched it, and so it's happening, Bose. It's and I had people reach out to me and they're like, "How is this legal?" And I'm like, I don't know, dude. I'm like, I guess, yeah. I mean, they're selling.
It's legal. The thing is that if you are an unregistered partnership issuing tokens in yourself or your work, and other people buy into the tokens that you're selling them, and then you fail, or you just do something else, or you spin up a new profile and do the bulk of your work on a different profile so you don't have to pay your shareholders, they can sue you and you're not protected by limited liability. You have no company. And so not only can they sue you, but they're likely to win when they sue you, and you won't be protected, so they can take your house and your car and all the rest of it. So I think in terms of unregistered securities, like, we're obviously in a moment of deregulation, right? Trump and that administration have basically said, we're not going to enforce strict securities laws here. Like, this is a time for technological play. This is a time for expansion. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. All bets are off. And then I think, in the subsequent political environments, that laissez-faire attitude will be rolled back, and it will become more draconian and be like, you have to register, you have to do this, you have to do that. Too many people have been hurt. And then we probably go into a deregulation, regulation cycle, and who knows how it ends up in the end. But my point is that there isn't actually anything stopping you from releasing tokens and selling them to the public per se, but you are vulnerable if you do that and you screw up. You're less vulnerable if you incorporate and you say in your articles of association, these tokens are shares in my companies. And you can do that because articles of association are private law. They're the law of the company. That means you get to say what the law of your company is. You don't have to ask anybody for permission. You can just say, these tokens are shares in my company.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good point. It's a good point, man. Very well said, Bose. I mean, articles of association are private law, and so it's it's well taken. Yeah, so that's a new thing. It just launched. There's tokenizing shares now on for people and creators. It's something that I think Lament really could do or should do or may want to do. I think so. It could be really good for that potentially. But there's a lot of risk. It's a pump and dump. I mean, all these things could be a pump and dump is the problem. So I guess that's the concern.
We just have to get it right. Like,
yeah,
we're given this opportunity under the current framework to try to get it right. And the hope is, I think, in the eyes of these regulators, right, the ones that have their ears to the ground, the hope is that by allowing this type of freedom and during this phase, right, that somebody's going to be rational and actually get it right. And And whoever does, right, eventually things are gonna, like Bose is saying here, like maybe it'll get a little bit more. You have to register everything, but the purpose, I think, in being where we are now and having this opportunity is to try to get someone. People are gonna get it wrong, and they're gonna do like we're saying here, pump and dump and all these bad things, and that's a really negative aspect to the the laissez-faire type buyer beware mentality. But the reason why, well, it seems to me that the people who during this phase do take the time to really think this through and figure out what makes sense, what's fair, what accountability needs to be in place, and design that type of accountability into the systems that are being developed and created right now. When we do, it'll leave them a better regulatory regime to fall back on based on the degree of technological innovation that may have happened during this time, if we choose to push it forward and try to do this right, where the regulations that end up coming into force will become more will be more sane, in that rather than just say, okay, well, everybody has to fill out all these different forms, and we're going to require a centralized way of doing everything, right? And right, it allows for the technology to develop, but the importance of thinking through the real world ramifications here, the importance of not just seeing this as an open season for whatever kind of weird thing you want to push forward and pump and dump and all of that. The importance of actually designing things with intentionality and acknowledgement of the real world, I think is extremely, we need to think in that way, so that when it does come to pass that people do get hurt by other systems, the freedom that we have had to experiment and to roll something out that actually does have sensible guardrails, that can be preserved within the new regulatory regime that does get imposed eventually. And just kind of seeing things from that vantage point helps us to appreciate where we should be spending our time and energy when we try to go out there and get influencers to use particular things and whatnot. And that way we are building with integrity, and we can survive the upcoming squeeze when it's no longer quite so open field here.
Yeah,
Can I
very good
respond?
point. Bose, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think we're overcomplicating it. The way that I understand this is that if I issue tokens as shares, and then I raise capital by selling the tokens to shareholders, to investors, then the best thing that I can do is lock them into multisig with the company. And I would want that to be a 2 of 3 multisig. And ideally, the regulator in the UK would be the FCA, would have the third key, right? They'd be the third signatory, and we wouldn't require them. If the shareholder wanted to sell their shares to another party, that would be fine, as long as they notify the company, they ask for permission to sell their shares to this new shareholder, and then the new shareholder submits their KYC documents to the company and says, I'm the receiving party and I agree to this. I'm paying this, this other guy, your first investor, some money in order to receive these shares. Then you both, the investor and the company, sign over the shares to the new shareholder, who is then locked in a new 2 of 3. And you have, as the company, you have the new shareholders' KYC documents that you then submit to Companies House when they ask you. So they don't actually care how you're keeping track of your shareholders. You could be doing it on an Excel spreadsheet, or you could be doing with tokens on the blockchain. They don't care. What they care about is that you know who your shareholders are, and maybe you've done some due diligence on where their capital came from. So maybe you've done some KYC checks and some source of funds checks. Provided that you give, in the UK at least, provided you give Companies House that necessary detail about who your shareholders are, they don't care. They don't care if it's on blockchain or this or that. And the only thing is that I would say hopefully we're moving towards a world where the regulator has that third key. So then if the investor says, hey, I want to sell the shares, and the company says, no, you can't, then the investor can go to the regulator and say, here are the articles of association, here's the subscription agreement, here's what I signed up for. The company is in breach. They're not allowing me to sell my shares. I'd like to sell them to this party. Please sign with me, countersign, so the regulator and the investor can sell the shares 2 of 3 to the next shareholder, provided that the conditions are met, right? Which again, I might be oversimplifying, but I think you get my general point, which
Yeah.
is that, like, especially, like, let's say the investor dies and they've left their shares to their next of kin, then the regulator and the company can sign the 2 of 3 in order to move the shares to the next of kin.
Quick intermission before you respond, Ty. Let me, if everybody could just be so kind to go to the pin post on my profile and press the retweet. That's the repost button. There's like 50 plus people in there. Repost this thing so I can start syndicating, because I had a lot of, I had the post shut down. The first one got closed down somehow, and so it's not syndicating as like it should. So if you just hit that repost button in there, a little quick intermission, we could freaking really get this going out there. So, okay. So that said, Ty, did you want to respond back to that?
I mean, I certainly think it's a good approach to, well, it's an example of an approach that aligns with, what I was saying about let's just pay attention, build something that's common sense, right? Let's see about having dialogue with regulators to maybe give them the ability to have that type of key. I look forward to that type of transparency as well in the dealings of these shares, where now, okay, we can see when the regulator had to sign and under what circumstances and whatnot. So certainly, yeah, it makes sense, and I think we'll see where the technology goes. But yeah, it's a good example of one approach that in that situation seems reasonable to me. That seems to be the way that things should be deployed, and it aligns with the regulations that exist. So
what's crazy to me on this whole thing is that you've got this base product, and you've got this lady. She's an athlete. She's a Olympian or whatever. She's just one. I think they've got a bunch more. But I mean, I can't imagine that they've done all that for this lady. She just seems like a regular person. And, it sounds like what Bose was talking about is more formal with a company and all that. So I really doubt it, but I don't think they did any of that. I don't know for sure. Bose, maybe, have you looked into how they're doing it yet, Bose?
Sorry, who?
There's a post, and I'm going to have Casey put it into the nest. It's Coinbase. They have a thing called Base app now. And the Base app has done exactly what you're talking about with the tokens for the creators, where they get to make their own token. The Naomi coin is the one they're talking about. The Naomi coin is a lady. She was an Olympic runner, and now she sells shares in her Naomi coin to raise some money for her meme coin, Naomi coin.
Again, it's just down to how much protection she's taking for herself. If she hasn't incorporated, if she isn't offering shares in an incorporated, like, registered venture, and she fucks it up, then people can sue her and they can take her for all that she's worth. So it really is just about, like, her appetite for risk, how much she thinks she's going to succeed, whether or not she thinks she needs to incorporate or whatever. Like, if you just decide, hey, I'm not going to incorporate, I'm going to release a token, I'm going to raise capital, and then you just fail to do what you're doing, or you fuck it up, or or if you're dishonest about it, then people can sue you. So yeah. I don't think there isn't really a good case for saying that it's just blanketly illegal to issue shares in an enterprise that aren't registered with the government. And there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, who knows what jurisdiction you're in? Second of all, people make unregistered partnerships all the time, every day. In fact, unregistered partnerships are the default. But if you're selling a share in that to other people, then you're vulnerable if you haven't kind of set out your company articles of association and all of the kind of boring paperwork that you need to do. But one thing I will say is that actually those documents can be very simple. You can write them yourself. Now you can write them with AI. you can say, here are the terms under which I'm incorporating, here is what I'm offering, and you can make it really, really simple. I don't even think for the most part, you don't really need to employ lawyers. You just need to be commonsensical about it. You need it to make sense, and for it to be simple. And really the most important part about this is writing human readable contracts that the contractors can understand. Your terms have to be simple and understandable. And if you kind of keep to like some fairly common sense rules, then there's nothing really stopping you from doing that. It's very cheap to incorporate in the UK. It's a bit more expensive in the US. They're making it a bit more expensive here.
Well taken, Bose. Thank you. Let me
right.
open up the forum to anybody else who wants to jump up and ask comments or questions here. Casey, did you have anything you wanted to add? Casey, Nicole?
No, just listening to the conversation. It's all very important stuff.
Nice. Okay, so hit the repost button. Only 13 people, I can't believe only 13 people have done it. So only 13 people have reposted the thing, not viral. Well, we're doing the Great Bitcoin Flipping Show. It doesn't need to be viral yet, but it will eventually when this thing happens. So, but yeah, so if there's anybody else who wants to request, comment, raise hands or whatever, just jump in. Please, now would be the time to do it. Otherwise, we'll wind down and start to wind down and give closing thoughts. So if there's anybody else, I got a lot of people in the crowd here, so feel free to request up. We got Babbage, we got Bose up here. This is like a perfect opportunity to talk about anything, really. Some highly intelligent people. Not myself, but I'm just a host. So not me. Yeah, so I always feel like I'm down here whenever Ty's in the room. I'm like, I gotta, my brain is just not quite. Yeah, I'm a fanboy of Babbage. That's all. I'm a fanboy. That's all I can say.
I want to speak
Yeah.
to the pump and dump thing as well, if that's okay. So no
Yeah,
one else is
please.
talking. So if you released 100% of your tokens onto the market and you were looking for a quick pump and dump, it's a really bad strategy if you're raising capital, right? If you're raising capital, you want to kind of go to market and maybe offer 10% of your enterprise to the public or to investors. You want to offer it in tranches, 10% here, 10% this year, 10% next year, that kind of thing. Give some equity to your main players, the key people who are driving the show, and to incentivize them to build it up. The idea that you would take all of your tokens, 100% of the shares in your company to market immediately it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Unless you have this, really strong base of investors who are like, yeah, we want to buy this and we want to keep it and hold on to it. And that the money that you're going to raise right at the beginning is enough to keep your company going until the product is finished. You've gone to market, you've got like an audience, you've got paying customers, etc. That's kind of the only condition under which you'd probably take 100% of your tokens to market in the first place. The meme coin market is all about taking 100% of your tokens to market immediately. They all
Those
collapse
are the pump
and
and
go
dumps. Yeah.
but they all collapse and go to zero because nobody's got any incentive to hold, and nobody's building for the long term. If you're building for the long term, you're going to release your tokens incrementally.
Okay.
You're going to be saying, here's 5% here for this price. The next 5%
I hadn't thought about
is
that,
more
dude. That's a really
expensive.
good point, bro. It's a very good point. I didn't even think about that before. You're right. Let me just throw another idea out there to everybody. Before we, and that is, I did talk about. I don't have Babbage is still here, so and maybe you too, Bose. I don't know if you've heard this, but there's this S-Crypt paper. It was a Medium paper they wrote in 2023 about swaps from BTC to BSV, and then I think they did a proof of concept on it. And so I've been talking to one of the developers about this, and I thought wanted to bring it up to you guys. Are the swaps potentially like an exchange concept that you were referring to, Bose? Could that be like an exchange, or is that totally different?
I think you should probably ask Ty about atomic swaps and stuff because
Okay.
I heard some chatter about it recently, and there was some chatter about it a few years ago, but
like I think it's all well and good, but I don't know that atomic swaps cross-chain works. But I don't know, maybe Ty knows more about it.
Ty?
I certainly think doing on BSV atomic swaps is very, very possible. And in fact, I can describe in detail how we would go about doing that type of thing for particular assets. Conversely, yeah, cross-chain is much more complicated. You have to prove, you have to prove that the transaction on BTC pays an address on BSV, or pays. No, that's you have to essentially prove that a transaction on BSV exists on BTC, and that a transaction on BTC exists on BSV in such a way that neither of those transactions can exist without the other one, and that they get confirmed and all this stuff. And I will be honest, I have seen that Scrypt has talked about trying to do this. I have not familiarized myself with the details on how they have done so. Nor have I seen I've never used an app that does that.
Yeah. Let me just kind of give you a basis on what it says here. It says here, first ever cross-chain atomic swaps between Bitcoin SV and Bitcoin Core by Scrypt 2023, July 7th. We executed the first atomic swap between the two Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin SV. This achievement represents a major chain. Okay, this says step one. Okay, then it goes into a lot of technical jargon here, which I don't understand.
So that's interesting. Maybe
it'd be worth a look because it is very, very technical. But then it goes into, he says, once executed, the code will print the raw serialized transaction, which we can broadcast to the BTC network using a Blockstream block explorer. This P2PW hash transaction script compromises of conditional clauses that require either Bob's public key and the secret X, or Alice's signature and the time delay to spend the transaction. Bob's reciprocate, and then it goes to step two. In response on BSV, Bob deploys an equivalent Scrypt smart contract on BSV blockchain containing the BSV amount he is prepared to swap with Alice. This contract provides two methods: one which Alice can unlock by providing X, another that Bob can unlock after a predetermined time that he can withdraw his funds. And so what he proposes in this article is it also has the ability to do a refund and not take the money or return it, kind of like a chargeback.
Based on what you've read so far, I think I have a good understanding of what is being proposed. So on BTC, we have a pay-to-witness script hash. And that evidently allows for somebody to code up more complex constraints on the use of Bitcoin BTC. So what they've done is essentially on BTC, Alice puts up some coins, and I'm going to try to paraphrase. I could be slightly wrong. Again, I haven't looked at it, but I've just heard what you've said here. What's going to happen is Alice puts in some coins into a contract that says either Bob will reveal me some secret, or after a while I get to take the coins. It's called a hash time lock contract. So there's a bit of technical detail there. I do see that could make it possible, given that pay to witness script hash would allow that type of thing on BTC, where then we would be able to either one of two things happens, right? Either the people cooperate and they reveal what they need to reveal after a commitment has been made, and then the swap goes ahead. Or if they don't, then after some time delay, the parties can take back their money. So it's like Alice and Bob, they kind of put a commitment in place that basically says, we're going to trade after this secret information is revealed, or if that doesn't happen because maybe Bob falls off the face of the earth or refuses to cooperate, then it would. And I apologize in advance that I haven't prepared I haven't looked at hash time lock commits HTLC in a little bit, but essentially the idea is, yeah, you can do it, and that makes sense. It's cool to see that cross-chain atomic swaps are being developed. I'd like to see more detail on that type of thing. One approach on BSV that is not a cross-chain swap, something that I've actually called BRC79, is similar in that it can do asset exchanges between like tokenized assets and BSV or anything like that. But it doesn't necessarily require the HTLC element. So it uses partial. It uses partially signed transaction preimages instead. So it's good to see that there is an ecosystem of swapping that exists between the networks, as well as on our network, at least in concept. I would like to see, and in 2026, I'm going to work certainly on enabling on BSV the type of swaps that are that enable trading one type of stablecoin or tokenized asset for another. And yeah, I mean, any blockchain that can do HTLC type stuff, I think could in concept do that type of swap. The main issue there is, if it's not atomic, what it means by atomic, right? For one is like an atomic swap means that it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. If it wasn't atomic, then what could happen is, it's basically Alice goes to Bob and says, hey, I'll send you some BTC if you send me some BSV. Bob says, great, send it to this address. And then he just walks away and he says, oh, thanks. Now he gets to keep both. Right? He doesn't have to send the one in exchange for the other. And there are, to be atomic is essentially to be, well, it's a single operation. And by the revelation of a particular secret, or by the execution of a particular operation, we then allow for the swaps to happen. And so you either get to keep what you had before, or you get to keep the new thing. Nobody gets to walk away with both. And that's the way that they've gone about doing that with HTLC. So yeah,
so
I mean, I'd like to see more papers like that, and I'd also like to see, well, maybe not necessarily more papers. I'd like to see more real world user friendly example apps or proofs of concept that actually put this into operational use. I mean, I don't necessarily. I mean, yeah, like let's just have more bridges and more exchange.
Totally. That's one of the things I'm working on right now. And that is, if you look at, this is the concept says, what if Alice or Bob aborts? If Bob does not put BTC into a mailbox A after Alex deposits the BSV, her BSV is stuck. Similarly, if Alice does not enter her PIN after setup, Bob's BTC coins are stuck. So are Alice's BSV. This is where a time lock comes in. Each mailbox has a fail-safe time lock, so coins can be refunded if nobody opens the lockbox in a timely fashion. For example, Bob can unlock his mailbox A within key B after a certain time. Note that Alice's first time lock on mailbox B must be longer than Bob's on mailbox A. Otherwise, Alice can wait until mailbox B's time lock expires and takes her BSV coins back and uses the PIN to open mailbox A and take Bob's BTC back. So the hash time lock allows for like this refund process. And yeah, super, super cool. And I'd like to get this done. This is actually something that I'm going to work on getting done with the development team on this right now. So it's going to take time, and we're going to have a process, a procedure on how it's going to happen. But yeah, this could be a lot of fun.
I would encourage that development team to also check out BRC 79.
BRC, okay.
79 as a way to do swaps on BSV to BSV, because in BSV land you don't need to necessarily do an HTLC, and then your experience is better. Well, I guess the experience is pretty comparable actually. Yeah, different ways of building it, and I'm glad to see that people are doing the are checking that stuff out. and it seems like an active area of development. I think like we're also working on stuff like that, and maybe we should work together on it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is huge. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I want to see the once the rails are done like that and nice and clean and easy to use, there's still it sounds like it can happen. So it's a matter of now just putting it into process, and that's what's going to cause the great Bitcoin flipping. So once there's easy payment rails and then the whole meme of the great Bitcoin flipping can happen. So, all right, Casey, Babbage, Bose, any last comments before we close down the space here? 2:30 Pacific today. Casey, Nicole, over to you. Or closing thoughts, Ty? Why don't we go over to you? Closing thoughts.
Just glad that people are here talking about this stuff and thinking about it. I think it's important that we get as many people as possible in the world to be reasoning about these ideas, right? And one of the best things I've heard in a while on X is, sometimes I'll just throw out a random technical paper screenshot or just a random video about what I think of a certain topic or something like that, and oftentimes not a lot of people would agree, or some people will, but not everybody by any means. But one of the best things that I've heard recently is it's really nice that we are thinking about these issues and that we are engaging in conversation and dialogue in sort of making sure that this technology is going to achieve its potential through finding the best solutions and building the best payment rails and identity rails and all of that stuff. I'm excited to see where things end up in the future. I think that we're in the right headspace thinking about trying to see from a bank's perspective what they think of something like the Genius Act, for example, or trying to see from a regulator's perspective why they would advocate for less regulation or something like that, right? Wherever we are, seeing things from these different areas and then thinking through what the best strategy is for us, how we can approach conversations with different people, speak in their language, put things in terms that matter for our audience, and then like if I'm talking to a logistics company about a smart contract that could create a competitive marketplace to allow them to deliver something in the most efficient way possible, I have two options. I could talk to them about the intricacies of hash time lock contracts and all these types of things, or covenant stateful propagation and all of that. Or I could just say, when you use this system, your delivery fleet is going to consume less fuel. It's going to get packages from point A to point B faster, and it's going to increase your customer satisfaction. And here's the case studies that we have to prove it. Right? That's the crossroads that we're at with this technology, and I think we're getting way better every day and every week and every month about going through and really speaking the language of the people we're dealing with. And then that's one side of the game. The other side of the game is going to our builders, people like me and others, and saying, here's what the requirements are, right? Putting those requirements succinctly in terms that the engineering teams, the builders can understand, so that they fill those gaps, and so that we can then, as advocates and influencers of the technology, push things forward and sell and actually meet the capabilities and bridge that gap and speak in those terms. And as a prolific author from the 1990s once said, right, cross the chasm. So there's a book I think called Crossing the Chasm, and interesting read, I guess I would recommend here at the end. How do we go from a pioneer of a technology towards the early mainstream, right? And cross that chasm and actually get that first use case to land and make a beachhead for our tech, and then actually spread it from there. So very excited to be here and help with that in the way that I can here at Babbage with my company and my technical team. We're on the research side. We do a lot of that, but we want to help people build and apply this technology in the best way. And it's my goal. And thank you, Gavin, for hosting this type of discussion and allowing these people to come together and have these types of conversations and connect some dots and make some progress. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. A lot of fun. Let's do it. Let's Bose, closing thoughts.
Do I get more closing thoughts? Because I had thoughts while Ty was talking as well, which something that came up for me recently, and I might as well bring it up here, is that software as a service is a huge industry, and creators out there making apps typically like ask for credit card subscriptions, and this is absolutely huge. And when you're building apps on crypto Twitter or Bitcoin Twitter generally, like it's just a massive industry of people creating apps and asking for subscription revenue. And it occurred to me that like part of the problem in Bitcoin is that it carries a lot of ideological baggage. So you say, for example, Bitcoin are push-only payments. Yes, they are. But that doesn't mean that you can't build a pull subscription model on top of it. And in fact, if you sign up to Helios, the Solana node, they will take pull